So the other day I made this little song, which was meant to be like Toby core shit basically, and I've been asked questions about it, and so today I'm going to explain some thought processes, some of the what I'm going to explain how I made this, what I was thinking when I made certain parts of this, and so on and so forth. And also my friend Kerstrank is here. Hello, Kerstrank.
Hello.
Such a chuddy. Sorry.
Hey.
It's good. I'm gonna start with this little piano section here. That's also what I started making. It's not just how the song starts, it's what I made first. And specifically, just this melody here. Now you don't have to start with the melody, but that's how I like to start, because I find that melody tends to be a very important part of most Deltarune tracks, of most Toby Fox songs. It's just kind of usually what takes the center stage. So starting with that and building around that can be quite helpful. The next thing I did was just add some harmony. Those are these other darker notes here. Right, and then to finish up the harmony, so to speak, a bass line at the very bottom of it. For that, it's important to make it, if it fits the theme of the track, bouncy. Usually a lot of songs made by Toby Fox have these very high energy, fast, and pretty interesting bass lines. And that's how this part here was made. Now, one pretty important thing is the sound selection, and this is already important for this part. There's a lot of sound fonts that Toby Fox likes to use. Generally speaking, they're from older video games, but there are some that are especially prevalent, and the SGM sound font is one of those. Both of these pianos, which are actually different, slightly different, are from the SGM sound font, and that is one that will be showing up quite a few more times. Next, I added some layers. Not everything I added was new, like this bass line, which is just the same as what the piano plays, but with a different instrument. Same goes for this square wave, which is just the main melody without the harmony. We got the trumpet, which is the main melody with one melodic line serving as harmony. And we got another synth lead, which is once again the melody with harmony. Together they sound like this. But not all of it is just layers. There's also new shit that I add, like these strings here. Wow. Now it does also layer the harmony, right? But that's not all it does. It's got more chord tones, and right here we don't really have anything hammering down specific chords in this point of the song. It's kind of a very flexible harmony, to put it very nicely. So I kind of just had to interpret what chords could fit, and hence what notes would fit. And then come in for the drums. These drums are also from the SGM sound font. They're pretty simple. There's not really a lot of stuff happening with the percussion. Could have perhaps done a little more. You can get more creative with that than I did here. But right now we just have a snare right here. And this little line with the hi-hats. At the end we got a little fill on the toms. And for this section that loops. Now we got the kicks, which are even more simple. Now these kicks are on a different drum kit, and I will explain why when I get to the mixing. Alright. Now, for this part, there's a new melody. Ooh, isn't that interesting? And as you might see, we have some motifs that are slightly mirrored here, right? This is not exactly the same, but it's still very much intentionally the same rhythm and also the same contour, so like the same general shape, right? These are not at all the same melody, the first one and the second one here, but they do mirror each other quite a bit, which makes it feel coherent as one track. Now, here's a little popular way to structure a melody like this. We have this first section, let's call this one the A section. After that's concluded, it goes on to a B section, which is slightly different. Right, and then goes back to A. And back to B. It can also go to a C section, which would be different yet again. Haha, C section. It would be different yet again, but in this case that's not what happens. However, that is what happens for the main melody. Should have probably said that earlier. But let's go into that right now, shall we? We have a little melody here for the A section. Then for the B section. It's mostly the same, but near the ending is when the difference shows up. Right, then we go back to our original first section. And then we got another variation, once again, mostly changing at the end. And this ABAC formula can also be found here on a smaller scale. If we defined this part as the A section, but instead we could also define this smaller part as an A section of the melody, right? So then we got A, B, different, back to A, and then C. Right, so this works both on a smaller scale and on a larger scale here, which wasn't exactly my thought process while making this, but that is something you could keep in mind right? But right here was kind of it wasn't my accident. I was just not doing it entirely consciously like that. But pretty cool that it ended up working like that. Right, for this section in the middle, once again, I've got instruments that layer on top of already existing things that the piano is playing, like the bass, the strings, which just layer over the melody. This is because the other things that we're layering over the melody are the square, the trumpet, and the synth. Take a bit of a break here. This is mainly to give the track some room, and also to make this section stand out and feel more powerful when it then comes back. And in fact, over this little thing, it kind of builds up to that a little, which you can see right here by the fact that more instruments are getting added. It builds up in intensity until it goes back to this original section that we've had. Except it's even more full now, the second time around, which you can see by the vibraphone down here, which gets added. Let's get to that. About halfway through, I introduced this little thing up here, a small little counter melody, which is used to bring in the vibraphone right here at this section. Which layers over that. And then just goes to be a layer of the original melody. And it worked out fairly well there. Another thing that gets added for the repetition of this section is this little arpeggio here that we have with the synth lead. This is once again what I meant with the chords, right? There aren't really any rigid chords that are being played where it's like completely undeniably, like a C major 7th or some stuff like that. But rather it's a little flexible. However, if you would allow me to find it, I did actually consider it for this section here. Isn't that crazy, right? I made chords, but they don't play. This is because the track didn't really, I feel didn't really need it. It's not what I wanted to go with here, but I just placed them with this little sample instrument, which by default doesn't have anything loaded into it, just so I could see them, so I could visualize them, and use that as the basis for the arpeggio. Which helped quite a bit. Now the drums, again, I wanted to give the track more room, so the drums to reflect that. Watch this. The snares change, right? Which makes it feel slower overall. Going from this to just this. Right, let's look at the mix here. Nothing too insanely impressive. Usually I like to work with these bus tracks where you've got other channels that are routed to it. So this one is for the drums. Let's like play through this section, why not? Then I can turn off a bunch of stuff, right? See, I turn this off, you only got the drums. This is not entirely professional, but I do like to have one bus where I have all the things that aren't really part of the main lead melodies. And then another one just for those. Right, and now coming to the reason why the kicks are separate from the rest of the drum kit. Simply because you have these little arrows down here, and if you right click on another one, like I did here, and then you click on a side chain to this track, which I did for the full bus, you can put it to the limiter, click on comp, right click the side chain, and basically what that does is makes it so every time you have the kick playing, it'll quiet down this section a little. Let me demonstrate this by turning it to the extreme, right? See what I mean? That's basically the reason why I do this. And I mean, depending for the genre, that can also kick through your lead, but I prefer to have it not do that, since those leads don't really take up a lot of room in the lower end, right? Whereas the kick wants to carve out specifically room in the lower end, just to have it sound pretty strong, I suppose. Other than that, nothing crazy, right? I put a bit more delay on my leads than I might usually. Maybe a little too much at times. I just know that that's something that can help for these kinds of tracks, because there really isn't terribly much happening. Like it could be a lot fuller still. So having these leads, which once again the melody is like the main part here, take up more room with a bit of subtle-ish delay, could really help if done right, tastefully of course. Other than that, I suppose it's pretty important to balance it out with the panning, which means whether it's playing on the left or the right ear. But that's not just for this track, that's usually always pretty important. With this piano here playing more on the right, and this bass playing more on the left. Or these strings being more on the right, and this other piano being more on the left. If this was like a more intricately arranged piece with a more moving parts, it is also completely valid, in fact sometimes quite nice, to have something panned 100% right or left. But since these parts are so entirely just rigid throughout this track, they're always present and always like have to carry a lot of weight in the mix, I decided not to go that far because I felt like it would sound a little odd, right? Like, you hear that? It's. Now I don't remember how exactly I put it, but that should be fine. Right. Another thing that's important is EQs. EQs, you can't go wrong with them. What I would say for EQs is don't do too much. Most things don't need that much EQ. Pretty much everything that you don't want any low end from, like this piano here, just cut that off, right? This is not a bass instrument, and you can barely hear the difference. In fact, I would be lying if I said that I could hear the difference right now, but it adds up. If you have all the instruments with like this little low end rumble here, then you get a lot of muddy bass frequencies that you don't want because they're not actually coming from your bass instruments. Same goes for my leads. In fact, these are all pretty high leads. So I was a little more restrictive there with the low end, in fact. Right, I mean, for this one, it really doesn't even matter, right? This one doesn't even seem to have any low-end rumble. But it's just, like, good practice to cut it off if you don't want it. So I did that regardless. Let's take a look at some of these instruments. Like I said earlier, the pianos are from the SGM sound font. Another thing that I did is I made the release time very, very short, right? So usually it sustains for a little after I let go. Here it barely does that. It's a very fake sound. You can you can immediately hear that's not what a real piano would do. But that's not what you're going for if you're trying to make a Toby Fox core song, I suppose. I did not specifically do that for the bass, but the bass already has real low release, which works good because, like I said, we want a short, bouncy, and snappy bass line. Tends to sound better with little to no release, right? Like, let me turn that up quite a bit. The bass frequencies get muddy because all the notes sustain, and that's not what you would like in these kinds of situations. The strings are from the Tohu sound font. I also turned down the release time on those. Didn't change anything else in here, but in the mix I did give them slight bit crush. This was mainly a decision because I thought it sounded better in the mix. And here I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, bit crush is kind of just like an aesthetic thing often. But I thought it sounded better with the other synthy elements like the square wave and the synth lead that we'll get to. I thought it blended nicely. Right, then we have that synth lead, which I would say we will get to. I have this one little track here playing in this shape, just on the default 3x oscillator from FL Studio, and the other two tracks are turned down entirely. Then what I also did is add some fast distortion, not a lot at all, bit of delay. I cut off the very harsh frequencies and also the low end. And another thing that can be quite nice for these things is to go on this plugin options tab, pitch, and then play around, add a little vibrato. Not that much. Mess around with the speed, the amount, and the attack until you get a sound that you like. Here I wanted like a very melodic vocal sound here, which is what I was going for with this. The trumpet is from the SGM sound font. I did not do terribly much with that. It has very little release again. I cut off some very harsh frequencies near the high end and also some low end. And then I just turned it up a little. Nothing crazy, nothing professional. The drums from the SGM sound font, or also, I just, like, you can put any compressor on that, you can turn it up any way you like. I like to get a little crazy with these, put on Sound Goodizer, because it's insanely funny, and, I mean, works well enough. Don't turn it up too much. This is already quite a preposterous amount right here, right? Usually not what I would recommend, but it worked for this case, right? And for the kicks, also from the SGM sound font. I put a compressor. Didn't put it too strong, but I wanted a bit more of the high end and the low end. Now, when I was starting out, one big mistake that I made with my kicks, which you should probably try to avoid, is doing something like this. Right? Like, thinking, oh yeah, I want my kick to be really strong, so I'm just gonna turn up the bass like crazy. Don't do that. Don't do that. You can do that if your kick for some reason has really low bass and it does need a little more. You could maybe get away with something like that, right? But that's not what makes your kick powerful. A kick is not just bass. A kick is a kick. It's a transient. It's also got high end. It's got mid-range stuff. And a good way to make it more powerful is to just have it cut through the rest of your mix with a limiter and a sidechain, right? So that's probably something to keep in mind if that's a mistake you tend to make. Now coming to the vibraphone, this one's from the Toby sound font. You might recognize this one, right? Toby Fox really likes using this vibraphone, but it just sounds nice. That's kind of why I used it. I put delay on it. Again, I boosted the high end just a little, removed the low end stuff, and I guess I also felt like I needed to put some sound good eyes on that one. Because why not? See, this is a way more appropriate example. Just that much. The sound goodizer is just a Maximus thing, right? It really doesn't always make it sound gooder as it might claim to, right? And the last aspect here is the square lead, also from 3XOS. Once again, I turned down the other tracks because I only needed one for this. Selected the square wave and also put on HQ. Because I think the square wave on 3XOS without the HQ, it doesn't sound nice. Like, it scratches your ears in a very unpleasant way. Especially if you got harmony, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, no, it's not nice. Once again, I added that little bit of pitch modulation here, just so it has that little vocal voice-like sound when it plays. Now this one has quite a bit of delay. Once again, I already showed this, the high end, the low end. I also put some stereo enhancing on this. Doesn't actually do terribly much on this one, but I would say that is about everything that I could discuss here. Now, this wasn't scripted or planned or particularly good, but just a bit of rambling, I suppose, showing kind of what I was thinking with this. But I hope that it was helpful regardless. So, bye.